There is a moment in life when you realize that the people who pull away, shut down, and protect their heart behind emotional distance are not cold, heartless, or unemotional. They are simply terrified of opening up to the wrong person. And because of that fear, they rarely let anyone get close. They rarely allow anyone inside the inner world they've spent years guarding. Yet, every once in a while they meet someone different, someone who unknowingly carries the three rare qualities they value more than anything. Qualities almost no one has, and when they sense these qualities in someone, something inside them shifts. Not instantly, not dramatically, but quietly, slowly, silently. They begin to observe, they begin to soften, they begin to feel things they usually suppress, and this is where the story starts. Because avoidants do not fall for the loudest person, the most persistent person, or the one who tries to convince them to stay. Avoidants fall for presence, for energy, for emotional safety, for the person who feels rare in a world that constantly demands, pressures, and overwhelms them. And if you've ever wondered why they behave so differently with some people, why they run from many but stay connected to a few, this is why. They are not avoiding love, they are avoiding the threat of losing themselves, and the first person who makes them feel like they don't have to disappear in order to be loved becomes unforgettable to them. That's where the first quality begins to matter. The calm presence, a presence that doesn't push, doesn't rush, doesn't demand clarity before they are ready to give it, a presence that makes their nervous system relax for the first time in a long time. Most people underestimate how deeply avoidants feel. They assume avoidants don't care. They assume avoidants lack emotion. They assume avoidants detach because they don't value the connection. But the truth is, avoidants feel everything intensely. They just learned to suppress it. They learned that being vulnerable is dangerous. They learned that expressing too much will lead to rejection, disappointment, or pressure. And because of that, they only open themselves in the presence of someone who feels emotionally grounding, someone whose energy doesn't spike their anxiety, someone who gives them space without making them feel guilty for needing space. A calm presence is not something you fake. It's not a trick. It's a vibration. It's the ability to stay grounded even when emotions rise, to remain steady even when things feel uncertain. Avoidants are not drawn to drama. They are repelled by it. They are not drawn to intensity that burns fast. They're drawn to warmth that doesn't demand anything in return. When they meet someone with true calmness, they feel something they rarely feel: safety. And safety is the doorway to connection. They may not say it. They may not show it in obvious ways. They may keep their distance at first, but you'll notice little signs if you pay attention. Their replies become softer. Their tone becomes more gentle. Their distance becomes less frequent. They may still pull back, but they return quicker. That's the quiet signal that your presence is affecting them. Not because you're trying to change them, but because you naturally embody something they trust, something that tells their nervous system, you are not in danger here. And that alone is more powerful than anything you could ever say. But here's the painful truth. Calmness is rare, not because people are bad, but because most people respond emotionally instead of centered. Most people try to force clarity, force closeness, force answers. Most people get triggered by avoidant behavior and push harder, unknowingly confirming the avoidant's deepest fear, that closeness equals pressure, that love equals losing space, that connection equals being overwhelmed. So when someone doesn't push, when someone doesn't chase, when someone doesn't demand emotional performance, avoidants experience a sense of relief they didn't expect. And this leads to the second rare quality they value deeply: non-demanding affection, the kind of love that doesn't suffocate, the kind of care that doesn't instantly expect commitment, validation, or heavy emotional expression. Avoidants get scared not because they don't want affection, but because affection often comes with hidden expectations. Expectations to always be available, expectations to match the other person's intensity, expectations to respond immediately, consistently, perfectly. But affection that doesn't demand, that feels different. It feels like a breath of air after years of holding it in. It feels like comfort without pressure. It feels like closeness without losing independence. This type of affection doesn't rush them, doesn't corner them emotionally, doesn't force them into depth before they're ready. It simply exists, soft, steady, and patient. And when avoidants feel that, they begin to show subtle changes. They linger a little longer in conversations. They initiate small moments of connection. They allow themselves to imagine a version of closeness that doesn't erase who they are. Non-demanding affection creates a silent bridge between their fear and their desire. Because contrary to what many believe, avoidants want love. They want connection. They want a safe bond. They just want it in a way that doesn't feel like they're losing themselves. But most people don't understand this. Most people make affection conditional. If I show you love, I expect love back right away. Avoidants sense this from miles away, and it scares them. That's why the people who offer affection without pushing affection that feels warm instead of overwhelming become incredibly rare to them. Rare enough to remember, rare enough to respect, rare enough to inspire trust. Because avoidants don't trust easily. They trust energy long before they trust words. And the third rare quality they value is something few people fully develop: emotional self-sufficiency. Not cold independence, not dismissiveness, but the ability to manage your own emotions without needing someone else to constantly regulate them. Emotional self-sufficiency is magnetic to avoidants because it removes the pressure they fear most: being responsible for someone else's emotional world. When they sense that you can handle your emotions, that you don't rely on them for constant validation, that you're stable on your own, they feel relief, they feel respect, they feel admiration, they feel safe enough to connect without fear of being swallowed. Emotional self-sufficiency tells them, I want you, but I don't need you to survive. That difference is everything, because avoidants have spent their entire lives trying to protect their independence, their space, their internal peace. And someone who doesn't threaten that becomes unforgettable to them. But this quality is rare because most people seek reassurance, most people seek confirmation, most people seek emotional closeness to feel secure. There's nothing wrong with that, but avoidants often misinterpret it as pressure. So when they meet someone who can love deeply without losing themselves, someone who can care without clinging, someone who can stay connected without depending, they feel drawn in a way they cannot explain, even to themselves. These first three qualities, calm presence, non-demanding affection, and emotional self-sufficiency, create a unique emotional atmosphere around you, an atmosphere that makes avoidants feel something they rarely experience: internal safety. And once an avoidant feels safe, everything about the connection begins to change. They start returning instead of disappearing. They start sharing instead of hiding. They start feeling instead of suppressing. They start connecting instead of avoiding. Not because they are suddenly different, but because they finally feel free to love without fear. And when someone gives them that experience, that rare emotional environment, they never forget it. They never take it lightly. They never treat it casually. Because deep down, avoidants aren't afraid of love. They're afraid of losing themselves in it. And the person who shows them that they don't have to lose anything becomes the person they value more than anyone else. And when you look closely at what happens inside the mind of someone who has spent years protecting their heart, you begin to understand why these rare qualities hold so much power over them. Because once they sense emotional safety, a whole new internal struggle begins, one they don't talk about, one they don't show on the surface, but one that quietly shapes every decision they make. They start questioning themselves. They start feeling drawn toward the connection, but scared of what it means. They begin thinking about you more than they admit. This is where the calm presence you carry becomes more than just a personality trait. It becomes the emotional anchor they return to when their fears rise. You might not realize how deeply your steadiness affects them, but in moments when they feel overwhelmed, when their mind wants to pull away, when everything in them screams to retreat, they remember how they feel around you. The difference is noticeable only to them, different enough to pause, different enough to reconsider the distance they usually run toward. Calm presence is not just something they admire, it's something they rely on without admitting it. It gives them a feeling they rarely experience, the sensation of not needing to defend themselves. And when a person who has lived in emotional survival mode for most of their life feels even a moment of peace with someone, that moment becomes unforgettable. It becomes the moment they start seeing you differently, even if they try to hide it. And that's when the second rare quality starts to sink into their heart in ways they never expected: non-demanding affection. When your affection feels like a soft invitation instead of a heavy responsibility, it disarms them. It makes them question the idea that closeness always comes with expectations. They begin to realize that maybe for the first time, they don't have to choose between connection and independence. Maybe they can have both. Maybe closeness doesn't have to feel like losing themselves. This realization is not loud, it's quiet. It happens in small, almost invisible moments, like when you show care without waiting for immediate reassurance, like when you give them room to breathe without assuming the worst, like when you stay steady even if they momentarily retreat. It confuses them in the best way. They're used to affection that demands an instant return. They're used to people who want answers, labels, emotional declarations. But your affection doesn't behave that way. It doesn't trap them, corner them, or suffocate them. It feels safe. It feels patient. It feels like something they want to move toward instead of away from. And because this type of affection is so rare, they can't help but notice it. They don't get this often. They don't receive this kind of emotional space from the world. They don't meet many people who understand that their distance is not rejection. It's simply self-regulation. That's why your presence lingers in their mind long after you walk away. Not because you chase them, but because you don't. Not because you pressure them, but because you don't. Not because you demand emotional proof, but because you don't. This lack of pressure feels like love to them, even if the word love scares them. It feels like respect. It feels like understanding. And understanding is something avoidants rarely get from others. They've spent a lifetime being misunderstood, labeled, criticized. But with you, something is different. And that difference begins forming something inside them they can't control: trust. And that brings them face to face with the third rare quality, the one that affects them more deeply than the others: your emotional self-sufficiency. They've met many people who said they were independent. They've met people who acted confident at first. But eventually those same people always ended up depending on them emotionally in ways that felt overwhelming. But you don't do that. You stand on your own 2 feet, emotionally steady, emotionally grounded, emotionally aware. You don't make them responsible for your happiness. You don't collapse into them when life gets heavy. You don't use them as your emotional safety net. Instead, you become your own anchor, and they feel that energy. They feel the difference. They see how you move through the world with strength and softness at the same time, and that energy draws them in like gravity. Emotional self-sufficiency doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care without clinging. You love without losing yourself. You connect without needing someone else to fill your emotional gaps. This level of emotional independence is extremely rare, especially in a world where people often look to partners for constant reassurance. But you don't, and because of this, the avoidant feels something they almost never feel: freedom within connection. They don't panic around you. They don't feel responsible for your feelings. They don't feel like they need to fix anything. Instead, they feel equal, seen, respected, safe. And that feeling begins to reshape the connection in ways you don't always notice, but they do. They begin responding differently. They begin showing up in ways they usually wouldn't. Maybe they send messages they typically hold back. Maybe they ask questions they usually avoid. Maybe they stay present in moments where they would normally withdraw. These small behaviors are huge for them, even if subtle from the outside. Because to the avoidant, every step toward connection is a battle against their internal wiring. Every moment of closeness requires trust, and trust for them is something sacred. Over time, your emotional steadiness does something inside them they didn't expect. It creates internal safety they don't want to lose. And once an avoidant feels safe, they begin to see the connection through a different lens. They begin to realize that maybe, just maybe, closeness doesn't have to be scary. Maybe opening up doesn't lead to losing themselves. Maybe vulnerability can exist without fear. And that shift is everything. It's the turning point where they start feeling drawn toward you, not because you ask anything of them, but because your presence feels like peace. They start remembering the softness you bring into their life. They start craving the comfort your energy gives them. Even if they don't say it out loud, their heart begins to recognize that what you offer is something rare in this world, something they may never find again. And the more they feel this, the more they begin to value the connection in silence. You become the person who doesn't drain them. You become the person who doesn't overwhelm them. You become the person who doesn't activate their defenses. Instead, you become the person who calms their fears simply by being yourself. And when someone who has spent their whole life protecting their heart meets someone who feels emotionally safe, it changes everything. It changes the speed at which they open up. It changes the depth at which they connect. It changes the effort they're willing to put in. It changes the way they see you. They begin to see you as the exception, the rare one, the one who stands out in a world filled with pressure, noise, and emotional chaos. And in their quiet, private thoughts, the thoughts they never say, they begin asking themselves something they usually avoid. What if I lose this? That question scares them more than closeness ever did, because losing someone rare is more painful than letting someone in. And so slowly, without announcing it, without saying a word, they begin to show up. They begin to put effort into understanding you. They begin to find themselves drawn to your energy, your steadiness, your patience. They begin to appreciate the way you don't try to change them, but naturally inspire them to soften, and they begin valuing the connection in ways they didn't expect, because rare qualities turn into rare bonds, and rare bonds turn into unforgettable connections, and that is where the next part of their story begins, the part where they start choosing closeness, even when fear tries to pull them away, the part where they start wanting consistency more than distance, the part where they start craving safety more than solitude, the part where you become more than a person, you become a feeling they can't replace. And as they start choosing closeness over distance, a quiet transformation begins inside them, one they don't fully understand themselves. It's not sudden, it's not dramatic, it's not something they would ever talk about directly, but it's real, and it changes the way they see you, the way they respond to you, the way they feel around you. You become the person whose presence doesn't drain them but restores them, the person whose silence doesn't feel like abandonment but comfort, the person whose energy doesn't create tension but ease. They find themselves thinking about you in the moments they would normally shut down. Instead of retreating, they find themselves wanting to stay connected, even if in small ways. Instead of hiding behind emotional distance, they feel the urge to open up, even if slowly. Instead of running from vulnerability, they feel something inside them pulling them toward it. They begin noticing how different they feel around you. They begin noticing how your steadiness quiets their fears. They begin noticing that you don't trigger their defenses the way others do. And this awareness stirs something inside them, a mixture of longing, fear, curiosity and comfort. It creates an internal conflict between who they've always been and who they are becoming because of you. They start replaying small moments in their mind, moments where you showed patience without pressure, moments where you understood them without needing explanations, moments where you didn't take their distance personally, moments where your presence felt like peace instead of demand. These moments stay with them. They become emotional anchors that pull them back to the connection every time they drift, and without saying it, they begin to trust you in ways they rarely trust anyone. Trust for them is not built by dramatic gestures or big emotional conversations. It's built through consistent safety. Safety in your energy, safety in your reactions, safety in your intentions. And once they sense this safety, they shift from observing you to feeling you. They start paying attention to how you move, how you speak, how you connect with others. They admire the way you navigate life without clinging to anyone. They admire the way you manage your emotions without placing them on someone else's shoulders. They admire the way you care without collapsing. And this admiration slowly turns into appreciation. Appreciation becomes attachment. Attachment becomes emotional resonance. And emotional resonance becomes something far deeper than attraction. It becomes connection. Not the kind they fear, the kind they can't replace. And as this connection grows, something else begins to happen inside them, a realization that you are not common, that the qualities you carry are not ordinary, that what you bring into their life is not easily found. They start comparing the peace they feel around you with the chaos they feel around others. They start noticing how their defenses soften near you, but rise sharply with anyone else. They start realizing that the things that usually push them away don't exist in you, and this realization scares them in a different way, not fear of connection, but fear of losing something profoundly rare. Fear of losing the person who makes them feel safe. Fear of losing the one space where their heart doesn't feel threatened. Fear of losing the connection that doesn't require them to abandon themselves. Because avoidants don't fear love itself, they fear losing their identity inside love. But with you, they begin to see that love doesn't have to take away anything. It can simply add peace, add warmth, add stability, add understanding, add moments of stillness where they don't have to pretend to be stronger than they are. And as this fear of losing you grows, it begins to influence their behavior. They become more careful with their distance. They start thinking twice before pulling away. They try to stay present in conversations longer. They begin showing you parts of themselves they usually hide. Maybe they tell you small details about their day. Maybe they share a personal story they never talk about. Maybe they let you see their softer side, even if briefly. These are not small gestures. These are monumental steps for someone wired to protect themselves at all costs. And as they open up, even if slowly, they start feeling something they rarely experience, the desire to reciprocate. Because your calm presence doesn't just soothe them, it inspires them. Your non-demanding affection doesn't just comfort them, it awakens them. Your emotional self-sufficiency doesn't just attract them, it teaches them. They start wanting to meet you halfway. They start wanting to show care in ways they never thought they could. They start wanting to step out of their emotional armor, not because you asked, but because their soul feels safe enough to try. And this inner shift marks the beginning of something even more powerful, the integration of the three rare qualities inside the dynamic. They start realizing that your calmness makes them calmer, your independence makes them more confident, your patience makes them more open, your steadiness makes them more vulnerable. You're not changing them, you're allowing them to become the version of themselves they've always wished they could be, but never felt safe enough to become. And as this internal transformation continues, they begin to see the connection as something that supports them rather than threatens them. They begin to understand that closeness doesn't have to come at the cost of freedom, that vulnerability doesn't have to lead to being hurt, that affection doesn't have to lead to pressure. This is the moment avoidants rarely reach with anyone, a moment where they stop resisting the connection and start leaning into it, not fully, not openly, not dramatically, but genuinely, quietly, consistently, in ways that matter. They start texting back faster, even if they don't point it out. They start keeping you in their life intentionally, even if they act casual about it. They start becoming more present, even if they still struggle with waves of retreat. You'll notice they begin returning more quickly when they distance themselves. You'll notice they initiate small interactions they never used to initiate. You'll notice they look at you differently, not with fear, not with confusion, but with softness, a softness that says, "I feel safe with you," a softness that whispers the truth they can't say out loud yet, "I care more than I show." And this care becomes the foundation of the next stage of their emotional shift, the understanding of why these rare qualities feel so rare. They begin to acknowledge to themselves that most people they've known in life have triggered their fears rather than their capacity to love. They begin to understand that the world often expects emotional performance, instant closeness and constant reassurance, but you don't. You move through connection in a way that feels aligned with their need for space. You hold love in a way that doesn't take away their sense of self. You allow depth in a way that doesn't demand intensity. And this combination is something they've never really experienced before. They see it in the way you remain grounded even when emotions rise. They see it in the way you give them space without pulling away emotionally. They see it in the way you stay present without clinging. They see it in the way you care without trying to control the outcome. And slowly they begin to realize that the reason these qualities are so rare is because they come from a place of emotional maturity, not fear, not insecurity, not desperation. These qualities come from someone who understands themselves, someone who respects their own heart, someone who knows how to love without losing themselves, and they value that deeply, even if silently. They see how different you are. They see how safe the connection feels. They see how your presence calms the storms inside them, and this realization creates a shift in how they see the relationship itself. Before, closeness felt like a risk. Now distance feels like the real risk, because losing someone like you is a loss they don't want to face. So they try, in their own imperfect way, to hold on. Maybe they express gratitude in small, subtle ways. Maybe they check in more often. Maybe they start sharing thoughts they normally keep hidden. These actions may seem tiny to the outside world, but for them they are breakthroughs, and the deepest change happens in the way they think about the future. Not a dramatic declaration, not a sudden shift, but a quiet imagining what life would feel like if this connection continued, what it would feel like to grow without fear, what it would feel like to love without losing themselves, what it would feel like to trust without guarding every part of their heart. This imagining becomes the starting point of genuine emotional integration, the moment where they begin to align not just their heart but their actions with the connection you share. And as they do, they begin to understand something even deeper, that these three rare qualities don't just make you attractive, they make you irreplaceable, because people like you don't come often. People like you are not easily forgotten. People like you become the turning point in someone's emotional life, and they know it, even if they can't say it yet. And the more they sense how irreplaceable you are, the more they begin to feel a growing pull inside them, a pull toward a type of closeness they've avoided for most of their life. Not because they didn't desire it, but because they never felt safe enough to allow it. But safety has a way of changing people. It softens their edges, it melts their fear, it rewires their instinct, and little by little they begin to respond to you in ways that reveal what's been happening quietly inside them. They start showing up not out of obligation but desire. They engage not out of fear of losing you but because being around you genuinely feels good. They reach out more often, even if subtly, because they miss the emotional calm your connection brings. They hold on to conversations a little longer. Their replies carry a little more warmth. Their energy feels less guarded, less defensive, less distant. You become the one place where their heart doesn't feel like a battlefield. And even if they never say the words out loud, their actions begin to whisper a truth they can't hide anymore. They feel something deeper for you, something fragile, something rare, something they're almost afraid to acknowledge even to themselves. And because this feeling is new for them, they begin to evaluate you in ways they've never evaluated anyone else. They watch how you handle discomfort. They watch how you hold yourself when things get emotional. They watch how you remain stable without pretending. They watch how you continue caring without demanding. These observations are not casual for them. They are the way they determine whether the connection they're forming with you is safe enough to trust. And with every moment that passes, they keep arriving at the same conclusion: you are someone they want to keep close. And once an avoidant reaches that point, their perspective shifts from self-protection to cautious openness. They might not fully show it, they might not know how, but inside, they begin hoping the connection continues. They begin wanting it to grow. They begin imagining what it might look like if they allowed themselves to step deeper into it. And that imagination becomes the quiet beginning of something they never anticipated: long-term emotional vision. Avoidants rarely imagine a future with someone. They don't do it because they're cold. They avoid it because the idea of depending emotionally on someone feels dangerous. But you've shown them that there is a version of connection where they don't have to lose their identity. A version where closeness feels peaceful. A version where vulnerability feels safe. A version where they can be themselves without fear of being judged, smothered, or misunderstood. And because of that, they start thinking about the possibility of something more, something that grows slowly, something that builds steadily, something that doesn't rush but deepens, something that feels like home instead of a trap. The vision is subtle at first, a passing thought, a warm moment, a fleeting image of the two of you still connected in the future. But with time, these small visions stack up inside their heart until the possibility feels almost real. And when the possibility starts to feel real, they begin acting in ways that support it. They begin becoming more consistent, even if consistency doesn't come naturally to them. They begin communicating more openly, even if vulnerability still scares them. They begin taking small emotional risks, even if they're terrified of getting hurt. They begin letting you see more of who they really are beneath the protective layers they've used for years. These shifts are subtle but meaningful. They are signs of emotional integration, the moment where their internal world and external behavior align. They're no longer just feeling safer around you, they're acting safer with you. They're no longer just sensing your rare qualities, they're responding to them. They're no longer simply touched by your presence, they're drawn to it. And as they integrate this new version of the connection, they begin to understand something profound. The three rare qualities you carry don't just affect them individually, they work together in a way that transforms them. Your calmness teaches them emotional regulation. Your non-demanding affection teaches them that love can be gentle. Your self-sufficiency teaches them that connection doesn't require dependence. These qualities enter their heart like soft waves, reshaping their emotional patterns in ways they never expected. They begin to feel braver, not because their fear disappeared, but because your presence gave their bravery permission to exist. They begin to feel more open, not because vulnerability got easier, but because your energy makes vulnerability feel less dangerous. They begin to feel more willing, not because commitment suddenly feels effortless, but because the version of closeness you offer doesn't suffocate their spirit. And as they continue changing, as they continue quieting their fears, as they continue stepping toward you, they begin to realize that the bond they feel with you is unlike anything they've experienced before. And it's not because you tried to fix them, it's not because you pushed them to open up, it's not because you demanded anything, it's because you allowed them to be exactly who they are while creating the emotional environment where they could grow into something more. The beauty of this kind of connection is that it doesn't feel forced, it doesn't feel rushed, it doesn't feel pressured, it feels natural, it feels grounded, it feels like something unfolding at its own pace, slow, steady, real. And avoidants crave real. Even when they run from it, they crave it. Even when they get scared, they crave it. Even when they pull away, they crave it. Because deep down, They've always wanted someone who feels like you, someone whose presence settles their storms, someone whose energy doesn't demand anything but allows everything, someone whose emotional strength feels supportive, not overpowering, someone whose affection feels safe instead of suffocating, someone who shows love without taking away freedom. And the closer they move toward you, the more they start to understand that the reason they value these three rare qualities so intensely is because these qualities allow them to love without fear. They allow them to open without losing themselves. They allow them to connect without collapsing. They allow them to step out of survival mode and into a version of themselves they didn't know was possible. And as this awareness grows, something inside them settles, a feeling they've never had before, a feeling that is stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than their instinct to pull away, a feeling of emotional home. Home isn't loud. Home isn't overwhelming. Home isn't demanding. Home is where your nervous system relaxes the moment you walk in. Home is where you don't have to pretend. Home is where you feel understood without speaking. And that's what you've become for them, a sense of home they never thought they would find in another person, a safe space disguised as a human being, a calm presence disguised as a connection, a rare soul disguised as love. And even if they struggle to express it, even if they stumble in their attempts, even if their old patterns still show up at times, their heart knows the truth. It knows it found something rare, something real, something worth holding on to, something worth protecting. And that's why in the quiet places inside themselves, they make a decision they won't say out loud, but will show through their actions. They choose you. Not with dramatic declarations, not with flawless consistency, not with grand romantic gestures. They choose you in the way avoidants love, slowly, quietly, deeply, genuinely, and with a sincerity that rarely leaves their heart. They choose you because your presence awakened a version of love inside them that they didn't believe they could experience. And even if they don't say it, even if they don't articulate it clearly, even if the words get stuck in their throat, their soul whispers it every time they think of you. This is the person I feel safe with. This is the person I value. This is the person I don't want to lose. And in that unspoken truth lies the deepest form of connection, one built not on demands or pressure, but on emotional resonance, rare qualities, and a type of safety that almost no one ever gives them. You became the exception, the rare one, the one they didn't run from, the one they couldn't run from, the one their heart recognized before their mind was ready to understand why. And it's that rare recognition, quiet, powerful, undeniable, that changes everything.